Evan, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on. I am excited to ask you a ton of questions because having seen the inception of CopyChief and everything that you've created, there's so much I want to dive into with the business model, who you're helping, so on and so forth. But for the person who's listening in that has no idea who you are, how would you describe to them who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here with you, man. I guess in a nutshell, I'm a guy who spent his 20s traveling the US as a stand-up comedian, which gives me a very interesting insight into humanity and lack thereof at times.
Well
uh,
played. Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, but it was setting me up for a bigger calling, which was uh, writing copy and then coaching not only copywriters, but freelancers. I realized looking back that I've been freelancing my entire adult life. I didn't think of stand-up comedy as freelancing as a business model, but I realize now that's exactly what it was. And things could have gone a little different if I would have known what I know now, but I'm glad the way things turned out. And so what I wake up inspired to do every day is help business owners, especially creative business owners, and creatives embrace the fact that they own a business, even if they're trying to resist that truth, and let it work for them instead of them always working for it.
Mhm. What would you say is one of the most surprising things that doing comedy taught you about really writing sales copy and positioning companies?
The most surprising thing is that the way I've been talking about copy lately is that it is a two-way conversation driven from one side, right? And I realize now what a blessing it was to stand in front of people night after night and have that same experience with live interaction. At its best, that's what it is. It's a two-way conversation happening from one side. Sometimes people feel the need to break that fourth wall and interject. And I was always um, a little bit interactive with the crowds. But for the most part, you're setting them up to have an experience, story after story, joke after joke, and leading them somewhere bigger along the way. And I realize now that a big part of any writing, but particularly sales copywriting, is that if you have an instinct for how your reader will be responding throughout your piece, it's a huge advantage, because it can be a little hard to teach that instinct to people. Making sure you leave some space after a big thought, the way you use sort of bucket brigade conversation continuers and things, it's very much about pacing, and it really can feel like a conversation for both people if you approach it that way.
I really like that. It reminds me of one of the things that I learned through like 2 years of improvisational acting, where it's like we'd be on stage with our scene partners, and it taught me to leave room for the pause for the audience or for the scene partner to be able to process what happened and then have a chance to respond. And it was like every single conversation was being built just one sentence at a time.
Right. Which is particularly, I imagine, hard to do. I knew a lot of great improvers when I was doing stand-up. I started with the original Upright Citizens Brigade.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
original crew, Mark, Matt Besser and Amy Poehler was in the group, and those were all friends. And I used to marvel at their talent, their ability to trust each other, to trust the scene, to live in the moment. And you're right. I admire that. That's a whole nother dynamic to let a thing like that breathe, because when stand-up comics do improv, and I'm doing air quotes here, it's who can race to the punchline faster. It's immediately into the gutter. There's no structure. There's no scene building, and And so, yeah, that's the big difference between stand up and improv, right?
Hmm.
Is that doing it solo, it's you and the audience for better or worse. But I imagine, you know, improv acting is a lot more like being in a band
Yeah.
and really having to trust your bandmates.
But speaking of which, you also have a background in music, is that right?
A little bit. No, I mean, I'm a music lover. It's my passion. It's you give me a free night in the town, I'm going to see live music. It's the thing I love to read about and study and understand better. But and I don't say this, humbly. I just have zero musical talent.
Oh.
My son is my son's actually a musician. He's 19. He's planning
Oh,
to move to
cool.
Nashville in next year, and he's just very, very good. And the more I'm around good players, the more I can appreciate the fact that I am not a musician and
Hmm.
never will be. And I don't say that as a limited thing. I've been playing guitar for almost 3 years now, and I still don't like hearing myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
As a respecter of the craft, I kind of wish I
Hmm.
would just stop it. But I'm in a band, and it's so fun. It's too fun to not do. But yeah, I don't have a music background other than just appreciating it.
It's funny you mentioned that because I think there's this analogy between that and then also dancing tango. It's like anyone I could tell someone that I've been dancing tango for like over 5 years. And it's just like, oh no, 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 this is a social dance that we do for fun. I do not go around the world. I do not teach. I do not perform, and I will not at any point claim to be good because I know how great
Right,
I
right,
could.
right. And good for them for still doing it and enjoying it. Like that's
Yeah.
the trick. It's like my band's finally to the point where I wouldn't be mortified if another musician that I respect happened to hear us for a few minutes. It'd be like, okay, well, they're up there having fun. But man, I just am so blown away by people who have a little touch of the gift and have put in the time to become accomplished at any instrument or to sing. I tried to sing too, and that was even worse. I just, um, but man, does not diminish my love of it. It's a beautiful thing.
Same. I don't know if yours is quite like mine, but I feel like I might crack glass if I try the singing bit. Yeah, but I love it. I love listening to it.
Well, you have a
People
cool
who,
voice too, and
oh,
like
thank
people
you.
always say, well, you have such a great speaking voice. You might. I'm like, no, I don't know. It's a different thing.
Hmm.
Like some people, and there are people who, been in bands famously and can like sing a little backup, but they know how limited they are. It is just I think it's like, that's where it's like genetics, you're
Hmm.
born with a shape of your throat, a shape of your mouth, and
Yeah.
those things that actually factor into it. I'm not saying anybody couldn't learn to sing, but I think people who are drawn to learn to sing can kind of sing. It's just like, they open their mouths and they sing along to the radio, and it actually sounds pretty good. And
Hmm.
those of us where that doesn't happen, we do it anyway, but we're not fooling ourselves.
So that's an interesting segue to the next question that I have for you because a theme that I've heard in everything that you've shared, from studying stand up to, being in a band, and also in business, the theme that I hear is community and connection
Yeah, yeah.
to people, and CopyChief, which you founded, which was like I joined like very, very early on, and I could tell just like the level of intention with being able to create a space where people could share. Like that was one of like the founding intentions. Could you tell us
Right.
a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It really was inspired by a place very much like it that was around when I started back in 2000, probably when I came across that board. It was 2005-ish. It was called the copywriting board, I think.
Hmm.
Message board is what we used to call, like, forums, right? And I'm telling you, it was like night and day between. I learned about copy like a year earlier. There was one course on the market then, and I had no idea what to do with the information. And then to find that there was this community of other copywriters and marketers, and they're all sharing and teaching. And it was, I mean, I found my voice there as a creative, you know, as a copywriter. I got my first job there. I met people. I'm still, Jason Moffat was a big part of that board. We're still friends, um, and so it closed. Mark, I don't know if you know about it at all, but
Oh,
it was run by Michael Fortin.
okay.
Michael is Michael and
No
Michelle. I never
of.
know what to
Yeah.
say, but still a great copywriter. And what happened was it was a free board, and it got real cat fighty, and
Hmm.
some, I wouldn't say trolls came in. There wasn't people we didn't know, but all the people in there started just really misbehaving and fighting, and there were some bullies in there. And he just woke up one day and went, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm shutting this down because I did not start this to put out fights. This is ridiculous. It's wasting my time. And he just closed it like the
Hmm.
next day.
Wow.
And it was sad. But I understood why he did it. It was just become a cesspool.
Hmm.
And then after that, there was only one other place that I won't mention that was just always a little the same way, you know. And so when I had the idea to start a forum, it really stemmed from I would go to conferences and I would watch these amazing relationships happen, right?
Hmm.
You'd meet other copywriters, you get to know each other a little bit. And over the 2 or 3 days at a conference, you'd watch a business owner meet up with a copywriter. They'd become like friends, and they'd start talking about plans. And then they go on to do this great work together. You'd see them at the next conference. They were there together now to talk about their business. And you're just like, and I was like, it's such a shame that this is kind of the only way that that can
Hmm.
happen. It's so limiting. And I was starting to find some success in my business. So I had copywriters coming to me asking, like, how do you get these great clients? And I had copywriters saying, I either can't afford you, or I can't wait for your schedule to open. Who can you recommend? And I had like maybe 5 people that I knew well enough to recommend. And so I thought, what if I could create what happens at a conference, you know, in the digital world, and just
Hmm.
open it up globally and like see who shows up. And I did it in, people like Ross O'Loughlin were, one of the first to sign up. Aaron Crocker, Robert Gibson, like all these incredible, generous, thoughtful, smart people. And it just grew from there. Um, and it's always had that same feel and vibe. I've just been incredibly blessed to have it attracts people who want to do right and want to support it and learn. The only problem I ever have with anybody who joins is I wish they would engage more,
Hmm.
because the more you engage, the more you get out of it.
Yeah.
And people get sometimes intimidated by the level of knowledge, and so they wait, and
Yeah.
that's my
I see
only
that.
issue. Everybody would just trust themselves. Like, if you can read, and if you've ever bought anything, you do have something valuable to add to a copy critique, or, you know what I mean? And just,
Hmm.
you'll grow, and you'll grow confident from there. And that's how it works. And so aside of that, I mean, I've never had to break up a fight. I've never had to, I think twice I've given people their money back because either the topic of their business was just made me uncomfortable. It was just so not a fit, and I didn't love them, posting certain things. And even though they were good people, it was just, they were in the romance niche, and it was things like that. And so aside of that, man, I don't think anybody's ever left angry, over 9 years. And
Wow.
it's
Nice.
incredible. And the difference is, Mark, the lesson there is that it's a paid community.
Yep.
I realized not only was mine a little bit more of a business model, but I learned from the copywriting board that you've got to put up a gate. And because trolls are not going to pay to troll, there's plenty of places they can go do that. You know
For
what I
free.
mean? And so
Yeah.
the fee is honestly just more of a filter than it
Hmm.
is. It's still incredibly affordable, $150 a month to learn and grow and make connections, and have access to a jobs board that we vet. And um it's just been and it's led to everything else good in my life, from that very moment. So
That's incredible. And do you still have the trainings as well?
Yeah. So we still do trainings almost every month. I try to be more, my thing about the trainings has always been, it's community driven in regards to somebody introduces a new thing they're doing and other people say, oh, wow, that's really cool. I'm going to do that too. And then it becomes useful enough, sort of proven to be useful enough. Then we form a training about it, either with the
Mm,
person who brought it to us, or there was a period in the beginning where I felt this obligation to put out a new training every month. And then I found, 8 or 9 months in, I'm like, okay, now I'm kind of forcing it. I
yeah.
think, and here's an interesting thing about having a subscription service. People don't always want more stuff, especially with trainings. What happens is it has the reverse effect. I felt like, well, I'm giving them all this value and
Hmm.
they may need this training now or not for 6 months, but either way, they know it's here. But what people have this interesting relationship with it where they start to feel guilty for
Yep.
like 3 or 4 trainings have gone by and I haven't been able to get to them. So I'm just going to quit. And you're like, wait,
Hmm.
what? So it's
Hmm.
counterintuitive. And so we started doing a little less and making sure everything was meaningful and something proven that we knew was valid and useful. And, like right now with AI, it's so great to have a community because, as you know, things are changing by the
Yep.
day. And there is no, at this point, people are getting stymied because they're like, there's no one course I can take where I'm going to be good. I
Hmm.
mean, there's no way to be good for more than a month and so I find so many people just not even opening it to play with Chat GPT because they're like, I just don't want to know. It's too overwhelming. And it's like, no,
Mm.
just play with it. Just have fun with it. Just see what your relationship is with it.
Hmm.
And so we have a whole section now for AI machine learning and CopyChief where it's like our little laboratory. It's like somebody discovers something really cool. They bring it there. Other people do it, and we're building out some interfaces and some custom prompts and things, and we we get to get feedback, real-time feedback for how that's working for our members. And I think this is the most important time to have a community because things have changed so radically and are going to continue changing so fast for the next couple of years that, again, this, what do you buy, what do you pay attention to before you feel like you got passed by again.
Hmm. It's it's so fascinating because another one of my clients, he actually created a course around innovating with AI, but he's in the world of WordPress web development,
Mm,
and there are some parallels to how the copywriting community reacted to artificial intelligence and how developers reacted
mm,
to it. In the development world, it was everything from oh my god, AI is going to take our jobs to I'm just not even going to look at it to some people being bullish on it. And so I'm curious,
right.
uh, from your perspective, what did you see in the creative world, well, copywriting and the creative world at
Yeah.
large?
Yeah. I saw the same thing. And I equate it. I wrote this in a thing, but it was basically all the stages of grief that we
Yeah.
went through. Right. I
Yeah.
forget the order, but number
Yeah.
one is like
I think it's
shock,
denial. Yeah.
shock, and then like denial, like this can't be real. This didn't happen. Right. So like denial and then anger.
Hmm.
So it was like denial was, remember, it was like everybody's like, oh, I gave it this prompt and look at the stupid response it gave me. This thing's junk, right?
Yeah.
And then finally you're like, all right, I prompted it a little better. And so then it was like, and then the anger was, it's going to take our jobs. And then it was like, what, like acceptance, where it's like, well, maybe not all our jobs. Like
Mhm.
maybe we can coexist with this thing, right? And then there
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
peace or whatever after that. And
Mhm.
and I'm still very surprised. I got to tell you, really high level people, creatives, copywriters, marketers, who was still eschewed it and ignored it.
Mm.
And I asked them, and you know that it's just so far they haven't allowed themselves to be bothered by it.
Mm.
And so they're either not afraid of it, like it is still gonna be maybe a fad, or they're like, I'll get to it when I can, or it's like I don't know where to start, just like everybody else.
Mm.
And it's what's interesting to me is it's so easy to play with, to interact with. And I don't know why, Mark, that I just got excited. It scared me for a minute. I read some articles early on, like back in November, December, where I was like, my God, this may be it. Like I may be out of work here, like we all had that reaction. Then I started playing with it and I realized I could see what it could get right and what it could get wrong. Sam
Yeah.
Woods did this incredible training that the thing, I think Sam's training turned it around for me, because what I realized through Sam's training was that you had to understand the fundamentals of good copywriting to make it work well for you. And if you didn't, you needed to go learn that first. You could still learn the machine and play with prompts and things, but you had just like with anything else around copy, if you don't truly understand the fundamentals, you're never going to get a good result, whether it's out of your own brain or anything else. And so I thought, well, this is actually a good thing, because this new device, this new tool is going to inspire people to go back to the basics and then grow from there. So from there, I got encouraged. And again, I wouldn't call myself at all an expert user. I'm a basic user, but it's become the greatest creative collaborator I ever had because of the way you can interact with it. It doesn't have any of the human flaws that a human collaborator has. It also can't bring the same dynamic and the same color to things that if you and I were sitting down brainstorming something, right? But we're both going to forget where we left. If you and I met once a month to slowly develop a product idea, we'd have to spend the first hour every month like catching up with where we left off a month ago. ChatGPT does not have that problem. Wherever you left off is where it is, ready to go right from there. Like that alone is so incredible, right? And so you can imagine, like, if you're a freelance copywriter and you have 5 different, retainer clients, you have a knowledge base, a file for each one of them, just waiting for you to pick up and go again. You know how much mental bandwidth that saves you, and how much that increases your efficiency. And so if I just try to get people who are still resistant to just like think of it as a real practical tool. And I think they'll quickly see that it's not the enemy at all. It's really there to aid you.
I love that perspective. I forget where I've heard this quote, but it's something like, AI, you will not be replaced by AI, but you may be replaced by a human that's using AI.
Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's why I say, but yeah, you won't be replaced you'll be replaced by copywriters using AI. I truly believe, and like, this is one thing that people always get uptight about when I say this, because they're like, oh no, this copywriter went head to head with it and beat it. I'm like, yes, of course that can happen in an instance. What I'm saying is, I don't believe you can be better without AI as a tool than with it. If you said to me, you pick 2 people and they're going head to head on, 10 different ads over the next 30 days. One of them's going to use AI and there's no way I'm putting my money on the person who's not using it, just because the other it's the idea generation. It's the research. It's the interactive research. Yep. It just leads your brain to places it could not go alone. And in CopyChief, our motto from day one has been, nobody writes alone. Yeah, and that's what I mean, is that we're all better with each other. Yes, there's times where you sit alone with an idea and you start typing and you get as far as you get. But once you get a little stuck, or you start to feel like you've hit your creative ceiling, that's when you reach out to other people. You start sharing the idea, you get influence from them. And that's the same exact way that I've been using ChatGPT. And I don't fear that it's ever going to replace a true creative anytime soon. I'm not worried about it in my lifetime. For my kids who are just coming into adulthood, I'm a little concerned. I mean, the job market's going to shrink a lot, but I was hoping they weren't going to do kind of menial tasks anyway.
1000%. My youngest sister, she's in college right now. She's in like her sophomore, like a junior year, up in Halifax, up in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I can't begin to imagine what going through college might be like now with AI. Like, there's so many ramifications. And then, like you said, also just like how much, whatever degree it is that you're studying for right now, how much will have changed in just 2
Yeah.
years of AI
Yeah,
by the time that you get your degree.
for sure. That is mind
It's
blowing, right? Yeah. And
yeah.
nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure. There's predictions and things. And yeah, that would be scary. No doubt about it. Like you said already. Yeah. That's why I feel like I'm excited that I get to experience it. And I'm really glad I'm way ahead of it because you're right. If you had to guess whether the thing you plan to do with your life is going to be relevant or not, hard to stay motivated.
Yeah, when you put it like that. Cue existential dread. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
oh man, that's rough. Getting a little bit into some of what some might describe as like the tactics. Uh, are there any particular use cases that you found really helpful for AI, and what's maybe one bad one where it just fails abysmally?
Mm, yeah. Anytime I ask it to do something creative, it fails pretty bad.
Mm.
I think the more dangerous fail for it is that it will give you inaccurate information. I heard a story recently of some lawyer who had it write some briefs or something, and he didn't check the work closely enough, and it was completely, parts of it were plagiarized or completely incorrect, and he lost his job and should have,
Mm.
because we can't get too comfortable too quick.
Yeah.
When I've asked it to give me examples of jokes before when I wanted to find a joke, and just bad, really bad, like not good humor. It's very polite if you've noticed, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it doesn't want to, it is not a fun friend,
It doesn't
not a
want to
fun friend,
offend.
an incredible assistant. So when I ask it to, the first time it kind of blew my mind, I was writing an email about negotiation. And my first question was, I know there's parts of the world where negotiation is just standard practice on pricing or selling anything, right? And I knew, like in India and some of the bazaars and places like that, but I wanted to understand more. And so I said, where are places in the world where negotiation is standard practice? And it gave me sort of this vague answer. And then I was like, tell me some specific instances. And then it got specific, and it just kept bringing me. So I started, you know, 10,000 feet. And next thing you know, I was basically standing on a sidewalk of a bazaar,
Oh, wow.
or something, and seeing and learning about the history
Mm.
of it. And then I could say to, okay, now give me 8, um, you know, 8 proven tactics of good negotiation, and in seconds. Bah, 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 bah. And it's not that I would ever cut and paste that, but, you know, 5 of them could make up a base of my own list, and then I could color it in
Mm.
with my own experience or other
Yeah.
examples. And so that's when it serves me best, is when I compared to how we used to have to search for things. And I know Google will catch up in their own ways, but that's what we had forever. Or Wikipedia, even. Think of Wikipedia. That's a better example, actually. You go to find out about one person, and there's a bunch of links in there. And next thing you know, you got 10 Wikipedia tabs open, and maybe some brilliant stuff comes out of there, or you go down the right rabbit hole, but it's going to be a rabbit hole no matter what, you know? And ChatGPT, you can just keep it on course. If it's going somewhere that doesn't interest you, you could say, no, let's go deeper on this. Hey, let's start over. Let's take what we talked about, but let's start fresh. Okay, got you. We're starting fresh. And it's just, every time I use it, I think of it as like the greatest assistant you could ever have. Oh, I'll tell you, here's the best thing I used it for.
Ooh,
You
nice.
want to hear this real quick?
Yeah,
okay,
please.
So every time I launch my programs, I will do a standard, I'll ask them a question. It's kind of like a Dean Jackson 9-word email with a different purpose of, I want to know how they feel about the topic. So, right. So Escape Velocity is one of my programs. Then it's for new copywriters looking to launch their career. Right. And so I wrote to them, what is the wording is important here, so I want to get it right. What is the number one thing keeping you from getting what you want from freelance copywriting? Now, notice how broad that is, but yet specific, right? So I didn't say, blah, blah. It was like keeping you from getting what you want. I'm not telling them what they should want, right?
Yeah.
And then I said, I really want to know, Kev. And I got about 75 responses to that. And I did what I always do. I reply to everyone, of course, but then I take the responses and I put them in one document, and it ends up being dozens of pages. And but that would be my reference point for it, right? So, but this time what I did is I went to ChatGPT and I explained exactly what I just explained to you. Here's what I've done. And what I would like to do is feed you all these responses and have you point out to me the major struggles that they have. And it said, and it repeated back to me that it understood, and it said, sure, load in the responses. And I did that, and it listed out 57 main, sticking points for them, right?
Wow.
And some of them were overlapping. So then I said, could you take out any repeating themes? It got it down to 31. Nice. And so now what do I have is this perfect document of 31 topics that I know are important to the people I want to serve, because they've told me in a very human way that these are the problems they face. But now I've used ChatGPT to assess them and analyze them. And then from there, you can say, based on those 31 things, take the top 5 and, give me themes for emails to write about each of those top 5. And then you can say from there, okay, give me subject lines based on this one topic. And I'll tell you, that's one thing it's surprisingly good at, giving you, post ideas, captions, like Instagram captions. Fantastic at that. It really understands each format and how to do it. Think of it before. If you had an email copywriter and you say, hey, can you write me some Instagram captions? Unless they're really savvy, or if they've had the opportunity to test captions, they really don't know. They're like, they can wordsmith it, right, and make it sound good, but they don't have actual knowledge. ChatGPT understands the format, and you can ask it, what are best practices for writing Instagram captions that get more opens, and it will tell you. So it's working on a knowledge base that it has to create what you're asking it to create. So it can do all the small stuff really, really well. It just fails at the bigger stuff, which is great news for us, because we are always going to bring the 20% that a machine just can't do, because it doesn't have emotions. It can mimic those things, but you can tell when you're getting true personal detail through humor, through consternation, through trauma, through whatever. You can tell that the person you're writing to, has lived through that or truly empathizes with it, and machines don't. And so we're okay for a while.
That is excellent. There's so many parts of my brain that are like lighting up on fire right now, because my academic background is in environmental sciences. And one of the things that I had to do a lot of is qualitative research, and survey after survey after survey after survey. And it's just the power of ChatGPT to be able to just make qualitative research, particularly the analysis of all of these words, and to be able to aggregate all of that data and then give us back. But then beyond that, like you mentioned, being able to ask it questions and then to get things into different formats. There's so much time that's saved, especially if content production across different formats is ultimately the goal. And like you alluded to earlier, it has access to so much more data to be able to do the pattern recognition of what it looks like across these different channels, across these different formats. That's fantastic. I love that. And it's also relevant for what I'm working on right now. So it's super helpful. There's something else nested within our earlier conversation that I'd love to talk about, which is related to the growth of CopyChief. You mentioned that things have been growing. So I'm guessing you've also now had to deal with, the growth of a team. What have you found helpful for keeping your team aligned, same mission, vision, goals?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you the most surprising thing on that was actually putting words to my vision
Mm.
and sharing it with the team. I always thought mission statements and things like that were just a bit cheesy, maybe, or gratuitous. But like with most things, we tend to dismiss. It just means that we don't know how to do it yet. So
Yeah.
it's much easier to, dismiss it than to learn it. And, I think this is true for most smaller businesses, is like, you might have a vision for what you want it to be or what it could be, but you also know that it is a winding journey, and you want to drive it, but you also have to react to what's happening and what it's doing. And so I always was apprehensive to say, this is exactly where we're going to be in 3 years. And so, but I finally, through EOS, we started using EOS in our company. And it's at its core, it's all about the core values, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are your core values? And those are not only sort of the mission statement for the company, but it's the things you hire, fire, and reward around.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, that was a huge shift. So when I sat down and wrote out our core values and I read them on a team meeting, the woman who's been with me the longest, she's been with me about 6 years now. She almost started crying.
Wow.
She said, I'm just so overwhelmed and excited and proud to hear words behind everything that's driven us since I've been here.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's amazing that she's so affected by that. Right.
Hmm.
And it has become the beacon. And then the functional part of it is, we are so good at now being able to detect if somebody shares our core values or not. It doesn't mean they might have a different approach to how they go about things, but we'll know if it's going to be a fit, based on those core values. And that was a huge one. And then just, being patient with people. Again, just by nature of my personality, I don't know, maybe too passive at times, and the older I get, man, I just let things roll off. Dude, like I don't get beat up by things anymore, and I don't get twisted out of shape by much. And if somebody makes a mistake, that's kind of one of the core values. It's like, it's the greatest opportunity to learn, but you have to own it. You have to own it and be responsible for it. But I said, but then you get to put your name on the solution, because you're naturally going to know the solution, right? And those have been the things. And one of the things I enjoy the most, frankly, is people management, the people puzzle. My integrator, Rachel, calls it. It's the hardest one because it takes the longest, to vet somebody and to replace somebody. We had a key member of our team quit in January to pursue a lifelong dream of helping run an animal shelter, which was beautiful, isn't, but it was really a blow, It was like, and we're still trying to replace her here in June, right? Find the right person. So it's just this, how it is. I think you maybe were freelancing for a while where it's just you, but it's always changing shape, and you have to, you can direct it, but you have to also be reactive. And so now it's like that, but it affects like, a dozen people at a time, and you want to keep them feeling enthused and heard and valuable, but also, I don't know. You can't force people to do anything they don't want to do.
Yes.
That's what I've learned.
1000%.
And so if they show up feeling good about where they are and who they're doing it with, then they're going to find their own motivation, and they're going to be incredible contributors to not just the team, but to your processes, to your mission, to your values. But you got to kiss some frogs along the way.
Story of life and business right there.
Yeah.
To one of the earlier points that you shared, just for anyone listening in, EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, if you're curious. And the core values, I had a similar experience with working through EOS to create the top 4 that would later be expanded out to be top 5. But I'm curious if you're open to sharing what are some of the other values that you identified.
our core values.
Yes.
I mean, I can actually pull it up for you if you want, real quick.
Sure.
This won't be great radio, but I'd rather
No worries.
not guess it. And
No, absolutely. We'll just build suspense for
there we go.
everybody that's
Play some
listening in.
music. Here we go. I got it right here. Yeah, so I'll just read you the headlines, and
Sure.
and they all have bullets. But number one is we are willing collaborators and honest communicators, which is, to me, I mean, honestly, we are a copywriting company, but we really are a communications company, right?
I
At
like
the end
that.
of the day, that's what it all is. A big thing for me and for our team is being willing to have difficult conversations, because they are the most respectful ones you can ever have.
Hmm.
You know, think about it. The most disrespectful thing I think you can do to somebody is ghost them.
Yeah.
And the reason you're doing that is because you don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation. Either you've decided something's going to change, or you don't want to work with a person, or whatever. But if you've gotten to the point in communication with somebody where there's a mutual understanding that things will go somewhere, and you decide to end that conversation with no explanation, that's
Yeah.
a major character flaw as far as I'm concerned, right?
Fair.
We honor the pro code, which at its core is being where you said you'd be when you said you'd be there, having done what you promised to do. Just being responsible. I have a whole acronym for pro code that I teach to freelancers, but that's the heart of it. Number three is we are perpetual students. That means that we believe in order to be an effective coach, you must be a good student, hungry to learn new skills, discover new methods, and we pride ourselves on being curious and coachable. And number four is we are driven by pride of performance. We always ask, what is the most interesting way to share this information? We place high priority on our personal reputations as well as the reputation of the company. And we consider our own ongoing journeys to achieve goals the best place to gain shareable wisdom. Right. And so anything we would want from a perfect candidate for one of our coaching programs is like, we have to be that first. And, you know, like attracts like, and like identifies like. So yeah, those are the core values.
That is wonderful. And out of curiosity on my own part, how long did it take you to come to the iteration of it that you have right now?
I think, you know, we had an EOS coach, which was one of the greatest investments I've ever made. And
Nice.
I think we actually got them done pretty quickly in a brainstorming session. It was sort of like me and my integrator, Rachel, and it was just like, just start naming everything that's important to you guys. What are the repeating themes? And you know, it's kind of interesting. Like when you look at I've seen some other companies, and it's a lot about like, you know, we are be very data-based or data-driven. You know, we never say can't, and there's no, and we're like, those all things we will say no. We're saying we're not willing, or, you know, it's like not interested, right? You know, so ours were kind of, you know, more about humanity and character and responsibility and figuring it out together. But once we kind of had I think what we had was the ones I just read you, the sort of the titles, and then I went and added bullets around all of them. But you know, it was kind of easy for me because I've been coaching so long that these are things I talk about with people. I'm always preaching these same points. And I love that and that's why I think Mary got so emotional. She's like, I mean, this is exactly what we've been doing and learning and correcting in ourselves and preaching to people we coach for so long, that it's just great to see them printable for the first time, you know.
It's it's really beautiful, at least like from my perspective, because I look at values as, I mean, one, it creates a strong foundation for a shared community, but it also enables leadership for anyone to step up and lead, because they
Right.
can look at the values and then use it as guiding principles to make decisions in times of uncertainty. And that I
Yeah.
really love that particular application of it.
Yeah.
Um, what has been, and how long has it been since you implemented it?
Probably, let's see, well, almost 3 years, because we're in our third year of running EOS right now. So Yeah, probably about 2.5 years ago, we sat down and made that list.
Is there anything over the
Oh, you cut out, your mic cut out right there for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Is there anything over the past 3 years of using it that has surprised you?
The whole system?
Yeah.
Yeah. Two things. One is that it still takes a lot of daily interaction to get things done. We are trying to be less and less hands-on with our people and our processes, but at the same time, how much it's improved that. So for context, a big part of this system is what they call the L10 meetings, these level 10 meetings that happen once a week. And the idea is that if the leader from every team gets together with their department, the other leaders have a meeting and decide what's important, something's broken, needs to be fixed. And then they go off and they have meetings with their own teams and they cascade that information, as they call it. And then in theory, Mark, you shouldn't have to talk at all for another week because everybody's really clear on what they're doing. It's not quite like that maybe in our world of digital marketing, where we have a new thing we're publishing or a launch coming up, or right, there's a lot of moving parts. But I'll tell you what, the difference between having those meetings and not having them is night and day. It is the ultimate safety net. If something's broke or messed up, it cannot go more than a week without being put on the table and a solution found. Right.
Nice.
So, and people who come into our company are shocked and amazed at the symbiotic nature of the team and how well everybody communicates, because we do it every Monday. We all are looking at each other, and it's kind of nice. It can be a little cheesy in theory, but we always start with, we pick like 3 people to share a personal and professional win,
nice.
Yep. And it's just nice to keep up with people and what they're doing in their lives, and remember that, oh yeah, they got that new dog, or they have teenagers, or, it really adds to the whole thing. And so, that's been the most surprising thing, though, is it's not as like anything. It's like, just do this and then magic happens. It's like, nah, you still got to stay in the trench a little bit more than you might have thought. But compared to not having a system, it's funny, you mentioned something to me before. I'm not calling you out, but this is what made me choose it. Was a woman who happens to be my accountant, because that's how I met her, is one of the greatest friends and mentors in my life. Her name's Jess, and she runs a company called The Bottom Line, and she's super proponent of EOS. And she told me, you don't have to choose EOS as an operating system, but if you do, you have to go all the way with it. You cannot try to grab a few parts of it here and there. And I would say that's very true. It's a big commitment. But we use it maybe differently than a bigger company would, or things like that. Most companies who use it are like service industry companies or law firms, or not a lot of people in our world implement it the same way. But I do agree with that. Like, the thing, everybody has a system, whether it's by default or design. And if it's not by design, it's gonna fault, because just realizing that the amount of wasted time and energy we had before clarifying things, you know what I mean? And so when everybody's pretty much aligned, you can get to the minutia of saying, hey, for now on, when you need something from somebody, let's frame it like this. Here's the problem. Or here's the people that need to know. Here's the problem. Here's my question. Here's some possible solutions if you have any. And then when can I hear back about this, right? As opposed to loosely wanting, I'm going to be a little conversational about this right now because I'm in a fun mood, and it's just like nothing happens. And so it's not about being rigid. It's just about being clear, right? Communication is all about clarity.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, you're in the business of communication and not necessarily just copywriting. And the other theme that I heard within there is that it seems to be helping you to facilitate community within the
Yes.
organization itself.
100%. That's a big one.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And doing things like, once a month, I have a private one-on-one meeting with someone on the team, and I always have to tell them right up front, like, hey, we're just hanging because I forget that I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And they're like waiting for for the news. I'm like, nothing, no agenda here. I just wanted to wrap you for a few minutes. And that is what builds community. And they all do that with each other. And, yeah, it's so funny because, I guess I'm a pretty communal person, but I'm also an introvert,
Mm.
and I'm very good at being alone. So it's kind of interesting that my whole business has been around building
Community. Yeah.
community. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting though. I have tested when I've ever done like the tests. At first, I tested as introvert, and then after improv, I tested as extrovert, and then
Wow.
a little further down, started testing as ambivert. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and the thing that at least came up for me when I would take these tests, it's like, oh, I seem to be more extroverted when I'm around the right people because like I get energy from being around them,
Sure.
you know?
Right.
So, yeah. So I can absolutely see how if you've built a community that gives energy and like it feels good to be around it, where even
Right.
though you need maybe take time away from it, like you always want to come back, you know?
Yeah. And the truth is, like, they almost don't want me around anymore. Like, like in the threads, dude, my stuff gets nothing. Like people show up for a training and all those things, but it's like, Kev, don't chit chat with us. Like we gets
That's
quiet
funny.
around the water cooler when Kev walks by. I'm like, but that's the beauty of a community. It's like it's of the people. It's their thing.
It kind of reminds me of like because I've got 5 siblings, so it's like, it's like when parents would come around, it's like it's a little quieter. And
we all sound guilty by being silent. They won't know which one did it. Right?
Yeah. It's a good time. If you could go back in time, knowing everything that you know now, to give yourself any advice at the starting of CopyChief, what would you tell yourself?
At the starting of CopyChief in particular?
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, let it breathe. Let it breathe. Don't feel like you have to put on a show all the time. These people are gathered here because they want to be here and it feels good for them to be here, and they don't need a production all the time. Kind of like I was saying before, it was actually, that was the big lesson. Too much is too much for anybody. And yeah, so if I were starting over again, I would just fight the instinct. I'm a performer, right? I was a stand-up, and it's just like, here's an audience, I guess I got to put on a show. And I would have not went through all that,
It's a very, very, very helpful answer for the kind of people who are listening in, because some of them, some of them are thinking about turning their service expertise into, a productized format. It might be an online course, it might be a group program, coaching, or large scale, small scale consulting program, or large scale coaching program. But there's also usually a community component to it as well. And so I can hear them listening in and trying to think ahead, to how they might do it and how they might learn from your experiences.
Yeah.
For the person who has maybe 5-10 years of service expertise, and they're thinking about, getting it out of their head and onto paper, a digital paper, is there any advice that you would have for them?
Yeah. I say, first of all, that's a smart place to start any community. I think there needs to be a central activity or exercise or some sort of foundational learning that people adopt. So it puts everybody on the same language, gives them something to talk about. So if you have a signature piece of content that's helped you build what will become your community and audience, definitely start with that and say, here's this thing. To me, a community is spawned from one thing, in that people want to hire you to learn a particular thing that you can do. Hopefully that you invented, because then only you can tell them if they're doing it right. Right. Um, and then the reason you started communities because you're going from one to one to one to many. It's the ultimate way to do it, because any consultant or coach knows you spend so much time answering the same questions, and people are
Yep.
paying you a premium to do it personally for them. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's very limiting. And so starting a community was my answer to doing that with the 60-second sales hook. I just wrote this quick little book, and it blew up, and everybody wanted to hire me to help them write theirs or get them right. And I is infinitely unscalable. And so that's what James Schramko, my coach at the time, said, go from one to one to one to many. And that was the signature training when they got in there. Hey, come in and write your 60-second sales hook. And I would critique them.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we just took that same thing and did it around all of our trainings. And then it evolved. So I would say, if somebody's thinking, should I start a community? Yeah, know that you need a foundational piece of education. Hopefully with some fun, if you can make them, exercises that everybody can do. And because what that'll do too, Mark, is I started with only 100 people. And that was enough for me to see, okay, how much does this need from me? How much of it handles itself? And we had all these great people, these leaders who stepped up, and they just sort of become, it's like I didn't have moderators. I didn't have anything in the beginning. It was just me. Right. And then slowly people just, like any society, if you took 100 people from anywhere and locked them in a place for, a month, leaders would emerge. Everybody, a society would form around that, that nucleus. And so let a community form its own nucleus, guide it. But the more you try to control it, the less gratifying it's going to be. Give people direction, help them find things, try to be as organized as you can. But otherwise, let it evolve, because that's how humans in society work and have since the beginning of time.
Absolutely. And having been a founding member in multiple communities, what you said is so right. You have no idea where things are going to go. And it's just, I've through online communities, I have formed lifelong friendships, like 10-decade-long friendships through these kinds of communities. And you're right. It started with a core learning that we had together. It was a book we read, a course we took, a training we took, something, and then we had something to talk about and to work on together. So yeah, that absolutely resonates. A little bit on the tactical side, I'm imagining it's been quite some years, and that you've probably done some price testing over those years. What have you found? What did you start with, and then how and why did you come to settle on what the pricing is now?
Yeah, good question. I think pricing is always the biggest mystery. Thing with pricing is very hard to lower the price. You can always raise it. I started at $47 a month. That was for the first 100. It's kind of funny. I set it at 100, and then I sold out. It was a Labor Day weekend, 2014. And we were like sold out by the Monday. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. And I told James that, and he's like, why'd you cut it off? I'm like, I thought we agreed that was a good idea, but I wanted the 100 people because to me, it was like the perfect 80-20. I would, like be a perfect test. So then sort of reopened it, kept it at 47 for a while. No, I think because that needed to be special pricing. So that was the founder's price. And then we raised it to 67 when we reopened it, and then kept it there, I think, too long. Then it went up to, I don't know, 79, and then 99. And then we started going to annual pricing. So I think our sweet spot was like $5.99 to $7.99 for the year. I think really that was the sweet spot. And now we're at $14.90 for the year. And I'll tell you an important lesson about pricing. um, even though you knew the value of something,
Mm.
it's like, how many people do you want in your world? You know? And what I've learned is I want thousands of people in CopyChief, and I want it. There's just a psychology to pricing where it's like, yeah, I'm willing to roll the dice that this is going to be. Of course, we have a 30-day trial and all those things, but once you get over 1,000, people are a little less reluctant. They start comparing it to other expenses and things, and you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's still they can still pay $149 a month, but our sweet spot was that $5.99 to $7.99. I will say this though, very effective, and this is why we ended up raising it too much. One is because I went to a mastermind and listened to a bunch of rich guys tell me that I was underpricing. Always a mistake. Are any of you in there now? No, but I can tell you, you're underpricing. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't pay it, but I'd pay more if I was going to pay it. You know.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
then the other thing is, it is a very effective tool with subscriptions to give people a special price and then raise it. Right. So price hikes have always been our biggest way to get new members. And it's just, again, psychology. We all have it. It's like, we don't want to give up the thing we have. But at some point you run out of ceiling to keep raising the price to where it becomes detrimental, you know? So I'm not sure. You can change prices and things, but then it gets complicated when you have people who just paid the one price and you want to lower it for everybody. It's less about sort of losing the money, quote unquote, than technically the logistics of getting everybody that refund or figuring out how to give them choices and how they want it. Do you want it as a credit? Do you want it as cash? It's, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
be careful about raising your price. Like, really think it through. I would definitely recommend with any subscription, raise it incrementally. And you want to keep it as a really kind of no-brainer thing. People have to pay attention. So make sure, you know, the value is represented in the price, but just because other people tell you, you could get more, or you see examples of similar things, get it. Unless you know their entire business model and why they have it priced that way, don't assume you should follow suit. It's an internal decision.
Sound advice. One of the things that I've also seen you do over the years is just really, if we zoom out and from the lens of like Silicon Valley, product development, like you've iterated on CopyChief like developers would, like in Silicon Valley. And I'm curious, so what have been some of the most impactful changes that you've made? You made the change and it's like, oh wow, that went even like better than we thought it might have.
Yeah. Well, again, I'll give you a double-edged sword on. So we changed platforms at one point because I had a tech guy who kept telling me the lifespan on my original form there's an expiration date on it, technically, or whatever. I don't know if that was true. You always have to just trust tech people. So we searched long and wide and chose a new one. Two interesting things happened. One is we lost engagement from a lot of our original users because they were offended at losing all their history of posts. There's no way to carry over all that history with their names on it, right?
Oh boy.
And I get it. It was kind of like I told you, I was crushed when Michael said this is closing tomorrow. I was like, can I get my stuff? It's like I've got so many posts in here that I could be repurposing or
man, yeah.
So that was interesting. Like they just wouldn't come with us. They were like, so that was a big lesson. But the format is so much better because we have now these private clubs we can create. Right. And so again, double-edged sword there, but the activity in the private clubs is always way greater than in the general forum. And so there's two ways to approach it. It's like, do I just want everybody together? And if they want to discuss a certain thing, they can start threads, and that way we'll have better overall engagement. Or do we want to segment people? Of course, they're still in the regular forum, but most people kind of tend to stay in their lane wherever they are at that moment. And so, but I would not give up the value of having the private clubs, because people go in there and it's like walking into a room where now you're focused on this, right?
Yep.
You have your gym, you have your grocery store, you have your water cooler, you have your job, you have your friend, your clubs you go to. And that has been super cool. That created an immediate change because you get the right amount of people together. Again, it's a nucleus, and cool relationships come out of that.
Yep.
Right. And if there's 500 people in a general forum, you'll kind of make some friends, but you're seeing different people all the time. It's like being at a warehouse party compared to a dinner party. Right.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic analogy. It reminds me of my time inside of a program that Ramit Sethi no longer has. Ramit's Brain Trust.
Yeah.
It's started as, hey, we're going to interview these people, but then it became very quickly about the community. And first it was 100 people, then it was 1,000 people. But the same thing you just mentioned happened. We split up into these like subgroups. There was a fitness group, and then there was a group for finding your dream job, and there was another one for like freelancers, and then for consultants, and really strong relationships were formed, such that even after the program got shut down, those groups continued. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have the way we started doing that in the old form is we would create a private section whenever I was doing a coaching group, so everybody could have that unique experience together, right? Mm-hmm. And RFL, one of my programs, number 7, which must have been back in like 2017 or 18, still have weekly calls. 5 or 6 people from that group all these years later, and wow. It's beautiful. And, we just had a thing where in a new group I'm coaching, somebody said, hey, let's start a WhatsApp group. Somebody was like, are we okay with that? I'm like, first of all, we're all about community. I'm like, hey, don't do that. No talking outside of our world. I was like, of course we're okay with that. It's beautiful.
That's great. That's fantastic. I think I remember some of the original people that were in there. I think Allison Carpio,
she came around a little later. Angie Coley was a major part of the community. She came on somewhere after the first year. Yeah, Robert Gibson, Ross, of course, Abby Woodcock, Ian Stanley was in there. Taylor Welch was in there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's Taylor gives me way too much credit as a mentor, but he was a hungry copywriter at the time.
I was trying to remember for the life of me where and how he and I originally had a call. And I think it might have been actually connecting through CopyChief. That now makes sense to me. Yeah. Small world. Well, that right there is a testimony to community. I know you have been very generous with your time. We've gone a little bit over here. And so I just have a few closing questions. The first one is, if you had to choose, if you were on a desert island and you were stuck with one dessert for the rest of your time, what would you choose?
That was easy. Strawberry shortcake.
Really? You thought about this already?
Why I know? Because in our family, everybody gets a birthday dinner and they have to choose their meal and dessert. And every year, without question, it's strawberry shortcake.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Man, that Cool Whip in there, and so good.
Another one which seems to have the world divided. If you had to choose between chocolate chip cookies and oatmeal cookies.
Oh yeah, chocolate chip.
Oh man, damn.
Sorry. When you say oatmeal, I don't know if there's raisins in there.
Oatmeal raisin.
There could be all kinds of things going on in an oatmeal cookie.
That's fair.
Now,
that's fair.
If you said chocolate chip oatmeal, I might have to choose that. But peanut butter anything is always my number one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had oatmeal raisin the chocolate chip oatmeal raisin for the first time the other day. I didn't know this combination existed, and I was floored. So I know exactly where you're coming from now. Yeah. And the final question is something you have a lot of experience with. You help a lot of freelancers find their voice, they find their position in the world. And I was on this call with Chris of Group Coach Nation. He said this beautiful thing where he's like, I feel like once we found our voice, it's, we're part of our mission becomes helping others find their voice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just this universal human experience of, going through the hero's journey. For that reason, I found that some of the people I work with, even though they're successful with maybe being a service provider, or, they have a team, they've even maybe created a course before. But when it comes to launching a new higher ticket course, the fear comes up. Resistance, Art of War, Stephen Pressfield. What advice would you have for them launching a new thing into the world? How do they traverse that journey?
Yeah, I think it's a stepped process. So I look at it like this. First thing to do, first assess your skills. What do you do uniquely well and love to do? Number two, do you see that problem that you can solve pretty consistently? Three, are you able to help people quickly solve that problem? So say like you're in a forum, like a group, right? And the problem comes up and people are like, oh, tagging you now because you're the guy or the girl who's so good at solving. Then you want to, so, okay, you've kind of found a thing you can do. Now we have to vet it. So number one, will people pay you their attention for you to solve their problem? So if you were generous enough to say, hey, you know what, let's just get on a 20-minute call. I can walk you through this. It'll solve it forever. And they're like, oh my God, thank you. Really generous. Show up on time for the call. They value your time. Great. Now they'll pay you your attention. Will they now pay you money for that same call, for that same information? Right. And now if they'll pay you money and consistently, now you can write it up as a service, you can market it. And now you've got a thing that you've proven that people resonate with you to solve for them and will pay for. And then you should create a product around that.
That is such a succinct, great answer. Thank you for that. That right there is like a reel or a YouTube short or something. Like that was very juicy. Thank you for that. And the final thing I'll ask is, do you have any questions for me? Because I've been peppering you with questions this entire time.
Tell me a question. I would go back to the tango.
Yeah.
Because I always sort of, that is one thing that I don't do well, that you cannot stop me from doing in front of people, is dancing. Because I'm not taking it from somebody else. There shouldn't be somebody else dancing if I'm dancing. I get, right? We all have our space.
Yeah.
What have you learned about tango that maybe anybody dancing any dance, what can you impart to me, even if I don't learn tango, that's going to make me a better dancer?
Oh, I love that question. I've never gotten that question before. With tango is often described as the hardest dance to learn. You could go a year doing it for a year as a leader role in tango can earn you the wonderful right to be called a beginner. And if there's one thing I've learned through the tango journey is humility and humor. It's like being humble. I found that, okay, before I even try to even think about assigning blame for whatever it is that happened, let me double check with somebody who is not myself to get a different perspective on what happened, because maybe there's something that I missed. And so it trains this responsibility and accountability and nonviolent communication. It's just like how do you take accountability quickly, and then also humor. It's just going to be way easier if you could find a way to laugh at the mistakes along the way. It's like,
it seems like a serious dance that people tend to take it too seriously. Maybe is that
it has that reputation, and you tend to have a subsection of people within tango that also like to not take it seriously, while also still trying to be like good at it. It's actually quite funny. But the other thing that might be helpful for yourself or anyone else learning any dance is this 4-part framework that one of my instructors first shared with me. I said, I went to her and I was like, if I wanted to be really good at this, like, what do I need to do? And she's like, actually, I love the question. There are 4 things. First, you need a practice partner. You know, you can't just practice solo. You need someone to practice with, and you need to have dedicated time for solo practice as well as partner practice. In addition to that, you should also take group classes so that you can get the experience of dancing with other partners. That way you don't fall into bad habits that you're not aware of. You know, and then the 4th part was private instruction. In addition to the group classes, you're doing a one-on-one private instruction to work on your own form, your own technique, and to also even learn your own learning style. And then 2, to work on your technique together as a couple, because those are not the same. Those 4 things continue to be true.
I was hoping you were going to tell me like, more hip, less shoulder, something like that. That'd be more.
Yeah, tango can get very, very esoteric. Invite her around you. What does that mean? It sounds beautiful, but
well, I'll tell you, my wife and I went to a group, like a disco thing, right? There's instruction for an hour, and then I was talking to this old drunkard dance instructor at the bar. This guy was great. He was nice. I'm not making it up. He was loaded. And, but he told me something. He's like, here's the best way to quickly become a better dancer. Just walk. You're just walking. Right. He's like, you see people and they're always reaching out to twirl somebody, and they're like always, and their feet are going in every which direction. He's like, dancing is just walking with purpose. He's like, keep your body contained to the same sort of perimeter of how you would walk. And I was like, wow. And then I started doing that. It changed everything in a second. I'm not good now, but I'm so much more in control because I'm a lanky guy anyway. And so if I got my arm out here, my legs are askew. I'm like, I'm not on solid ground anymore, you know? So little things like that, you know, and that's why it must feel so great to get good at dancing, because just to share that experience with somebody and to move in sync in a natural way. God, beautiful. And that just like everything we've been talking about. Yes. You got to do all the hard part for it to feel easy and natural, right? That's the bummer of getting good at anything. You got to get through the hard part first.
It's there's this martial arts analogy where it's like you have to first figure out the form to leave the form. You know, and it's like there's you master the structure so that you can then have freedom, you know, to express and be however you want to be. But what that you said he was drunk when he told you that?
Yeah. Very good.
That's fantastic. That's the best drunk advice I think I've heard. Like, it checks out. No, I was just like, that whole less is more thing. That applies to tango. No, that's fantastic. I'm going to tango like later on tonight. I'm gonna do more of that.
Yeah.
So, thank you. That's solid. Thank you so much for this. This was a pleasure. This was so much fun, and I hope it's not the last. Maybe we'll do another one like next year or something. I absolutely. There's so much more that we could continue to talk about, but I just want to thank you again for the gems that you've shared. And is there anything else that you'd like to share before we call this a wrap?
I think that's it, man. I think, you know, kind of like what we were just saying, let it be fun, let it be natural. If you think you can't write and you wish you were writing more for your business, just start with no agenda. Things only get hard when you realize they should be. And so let it be as natural as it can be. And just like writing a letter to a friend. And if you don't write at all right now, start writing to people. They will love it. Like learn how to communicate. It's a different way. You'll write it different than you would say it, right? Or anything else. So yeah, embrace writing. It'll be good to you.
I love it. Thank you so much. Hey, thanks for checking out the show. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like button and also subscribe so you don't miss another one. It also tells us which ones that you like the most so that we can then do more interviews like that. If you want to go from idea to implementation, though, especially if you're wanting to productize your expertise so that you can scale your impact on your clients and, of course, grow your business, then join our email list. There, we're going to talk about how modern consultants can productize their expertise so that they can have a greater impact on the world around them and live life on their terms. If that's up your alley, I hope to see you on the other side. Talk soon.